Hey everybody, this is Perch, and apparently Squirrel Girl has a hot ass. I got a lot of mails on this subject, like a lot. I haven't seen this kind of attention since Yara Fleur's epic ass. Anyway, I'll read this to you. I'll read you two mails that we have. It says Marvel Rivals and Squirrel Girl's hot ass. Hey Perch, I want to get your take on this. The biggest thing to come out of Marvel this year might not be a movie or a comic book. It's a video game. Marvel Rivals just dropped, and with 400,000 concurrent players, it's been the talk of the internet. The game looks beautiful, though it does need some rebalancing, but I can definitely see it lasting a while. Honestly, it's doing more for characters like Jep the Landshark, fuck him, and Squirrel Girl than the comic division could ever hope to do. First, both characters are good in the game. That's an important factor. Second, they've been drawn in an appealing style, especially Squirrel Girl. See the attached picture, and we're showing some on the screen, hopefully right now, if I can remember right. I have a feeling that if the comic division tried to piggyback off this success, it would end up being a half-baked attempt with art by Riley Rossmo. Harsh. I maintain Riley Rossmo, who's on I can't remember it. The Moon is Following Us. I think it you know what I mean. That's the Daniel Warren Johnson comic. I think like perfect Riley Rossmo use of Riley Rossmo. It absolutely it just works. Anyway, all right. So let's go to the other email. It says, "Dear Perch, so the theory that the genuine popularity of a property can be measured by the amount of erotics it inspires is certainly a theory, which is fair. It proves that there is enough interest in the property that commissioners choose to spend their money and artists choose to spend their time in adding content to the existing mess." Okay. Now the graphic, and there's some stuff in the mail. I'm not going to be sure. It's like the graphic suggests a lot of things. The graphic talks about Marvel, various Marvel things that are in the search engine. It says Marvel Comics is 8 times larger than Marvel Cinematic Universe, and if you know what this might be, it's just not well monetized. Yeah, in terms of raw content and characters, more than 8 times. I mean, massive. And so if you think about a comic book gets read, and if you think about, the X-Men has, hundreds of issues and they all get read by, thousands of people, then yeah, you've got more pages, more, in theory, clicks on comic books than the cinematic universe. For sure you do. I mean, it'd be impossible for that not to happen. You've got, for one thing, you're comparing, a movie universe of 15 odd years or so, 20 years now, against comics of like close to 100 years, and you're talking about thousands and thousands of issues. The problem is, one individual comic or storyline versus a movie is not going to work. Anyway, we'll get past that. It says, but as we see with Marvel Rivals, a very recent video game release with its own take on classic characters. 500 is only a small amount. This is going back to the stat, not important, but it is a much smaller amount of time, only 4 days. In fact, in particular, Squirrel Girl, currently she is hoarding the majority of those 500 fan arts all to herself. People are drawing Squirrel Girl like mad. What is more, this may actually be intentional, though certainly not by anyone near Disney or Marvel leadership, which means in the future, Squirrel Girl in the comics may be an impersonation of Squirrel Girl in the Marvel Rivals. If not, okay, and so it goes in, and then there's a picture of like, fugly Squirrel Girl from the comic book, and then the new Squirrel Girl. The point here in these mails, and then there were several more talking about her ass, I would get that, the various things that you do. The point is this. So I guess there's a couple questions here. Number one, is Squirrel Girl going to look in the comics as she looks in the Marvel Rivals game? Because the Marvel Rivals game is getting, a ton of attention. So at what point does the comic book update itself to look like that? And the answer is probably never. Unfortunately, I think, the idea, and I've seen a couple comic creators already speaking out against Marvel Rivals and kind of the male gazy art within. And it's like what you're going to see inside the comic division is like that's a cheap Hollywood commercialization of our good work, and then you'll see kind of almost people do intentionally the opposite. Or, what you'll also see is, very cheap artists from South America brought in to do Squirrel Girl. And then you'll get like Frank Cho to do some super ass friendly Squirrel Girl covers. and then you'll sucker people into buying something, and then you open it up and it's like, oh, okay. The problem with this is I do agree, these comics are gonna they would sell better if the art was, the characters were sexy and everything else, and it was appealing to look at. But if the story is still like Squirrel Girl is having lunch, and then she's got to stop the vulture, and they end up having a picnic together. Even if it's drawn really amazing, like I don't. Do you want that? Like, for example, go look at some of these comics that have come out that have just been kind of grown friendly comics, or rather, look at the Marvel Voices, the anthologies, or DC's version, and you have all these short stories, half of them seemingly to do with food. And now imagine that instead of the random artists that you see inside the book, imagine that it was the best artists in the world. Like Jim Lee was doing one of them, and then Olivier Coipel is doing another, and you have John Byrne doing one, you have Art Adams doing one, J. Scott Campbell doing one. And so the art is now amazing, but it's the same 4-page story about how Miles Morales is learning how to make empanadas, and this is somehow, relevant to his culture. I Do you have a good comic on your hands? And it's a tough question because for several, the answer will be yes. It looks pretty, so therefore it's good. But I just don't think I don't think so. I think if the story is awful, the story is awful, and that is, what are you going to do with that? So, first, I don't believe they're going to change Squirrel Girl to look like in the comics like she does in the game. There's already a lot of negative comments that's only going to increase, and comics is damn stubborn. There are people who are just going to dig in and want to do it even less because it's getting popularity. Um, but it is interesting, right? That you're basically consider this, um, and this is a very weird way to look at it. I'm sure that it took a lot of time to write that story around the uncancelable wasp and the what is it the Legion of Girl or whatever the scientist that she created, kind of this group of autistic scientists that she was working with. I'm sure that a lot of Netflix had to be watched, and there was a lot of other things, but in the end, a relatively and I have not played Rivals. In full defense, I haven't played it. I don't know if this is truly like the Final Fantasy VII of our time, or if it is a button masher game. I have no idea. But I'm willing to bet that the choose your character and then what happens from it is not terribly complex. And yet, they put a prettier skin on the character than what you see in the comics, and they have a relatively simplistic game. And chances are that's going to create more visits, more views, and more entertainment than pretty much anything the comic has done. And so, if you're a comic writer, and you have you're able to get paired up with a reasonably cheesecakey artist. And the funny thing is, like, you could go on the internet and you can find people on DeviantArt or other places. That's probably, nobody uses DeviantArt anymore. You got to go to Instagram for this. Anyway, find a artist that draws, reasonably good cheesecake, and then write the most shallow story you can find. A lot of you are going to groan and roll your eyes at this, but like, the story is this: Squirrel Girl shows up, and the Serpent Society is robbing a bank, and Squirrel Girl goes running in there, and then she has to fight through the various members of the Serpent Society using a variety of kind of stealth and various comedy moves and everything else. And she gets to the end, and she's about to win, and suddenly they all gang up on her, and they kidnap her, and then they take her to the Statue of Liberty for some fucking reason, and then they're gonna murder her in front of the world. But she breaks free and defeats them, and that's the story. It's like, it's a story you would find in a Marvel's first reads, pop-up book for 4-year-olds. That level of story quality. I used to read these 5-minute Marvel stories to my daughter when she was young, and it was like, Ant-Man is going to the science museum, and on the way to the science museum, oh no, it's the absorbing man, and he's fucking things up again. And so Ant-Man gets all of his ants, and it's a hard battle, but he wins. And like, that was a story. Like, it was like dumb as hell story. But my daughter was 4, and so she liked it. But you could take that story and throw some cheesecakey art on it, and probably people would go for it. I mean, because I'm not saying the story doesn't matter, and God knows I love, the God Loves Man Kills Daredevil story and all the great, work that we've seen. I'm not saying writers aren't important, but I'm saying a straightforward superhero story with amazing art probably sells really well than some decompressed, we're going to give you what you didn't know what you need with shitty art story that's forever changing the way you look at superheroes. That's my view. And anyway, Squirrel Girl has a hot ass at this point. So there you go. I don't know how that works with that giant tail though. It just feels like that would be a barrier to entry, no pun intended. Anyway, thanks for listening.